Hi, this is the Magnificent Midlife podcast and I'm Rachel Lancaster. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started. And the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now is our time.
Hello, it's just me back with a solo podcast, and I am a bit late in this season doing that, and there's a reason for that. My excuse is a very, very good reason, as I was doing one of my assignments for my master's, and these things, no matter how I try to plan, I have this process and I know my process. I have to read, and then I have to let thoughts cogitate, and then I'm able to write, and then suddenly it all comes together. But it takes a lot longer than I think it's going to take, hence why I am late this season with my solo podcast, but here I am. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is that my last podcast solo was in July. And it was shortly before I had the most momentous news. Absolutely incredible. My book, my little self-published book, was recommended by the New York Times as one of 7 top books about menopause. I still can't quite believe it. I really can't believe it. But yes, I will put the link in the show notes if you haven't seen that and you haven't heard me talk about it before that happened, which was quite amazing and miraculous, really. And my book sales suddenly went really rather good. They have subsequently slipped back. And I have to say, if you're still looking for the perfect Christmas present, because this is going out in December in 2023, if you're still looking for a perfect Christmas gift for the female friend in your life or your neighbour or your sister, for any woman, buy them my book, because even the younger ones, that's one thing that's really coming out of what we're talking about, is that we need to get to women a lot younger, so that they don't get frightened that they've got early onset Alzheimer's if they start getting a bit of brain fog in their early 40s, for example. So we need to get to women a lot earlier. So any woman in your life, you could buy them my book. It's going to help. So that was very, very exciting. And then on the last podcast, I was also talking about MenoClarity Live that was coming up in September. Of course, now it's December, so we've done MenoClarity Live, and it was a stonking success. It was so good. It was beyond my wildest dreams, actually, and the event came together, and it was a live event during the day. And oh my goodness, we had nutritional therapy, we had progesterone therapy, we had the healing power of menopause, the role of histamine, Chinese medicine and menopause, menopause beyond HRT, menopause education, menopause in the workplace. Oh, it was incredible. There was diverse menopause. There was finding the true truth, which is, I know you will know what I like to do when it comes to data and statistics about menopause. It was brilliant. It was so brilliant. And some brilliant things came out of it. But if you missed it, you can still listen to it. You just go to MenoClarity.com and click on the link for the live event, and you can sign up to get the recordings. It's all free. All we're asking for is your email address so that we can send you the details as to how to access the recordings. But it well worth it. And subsequently, I have been starting to be involved in a new national education program for menopause, which is being set up out of UCL by the incredible Professor Joyce Harper, who has been a guest on here and is one of my fellow founder members of MenoClarity. She is working on this national menopause education program because, again, we need to get to women earlier. We need to get to more women. We need to teach them about menopause so that they have all the information they need at their fingertips and they don't get sucked into the very negative narratives. It just seems to be getting worse and worse, actually. I'll try not to go too far down that rabbit hole. But, I don't know, this whole deficiency narrative and the fact that we need HRT forever. Otherwise, we're going to, just die as soon as we go through menopause. That seems to be the narrative that some people are pushing. Is so damaging to women. It doesn't empower women. It negates us as postmenopausal women. Anyway, I'm involved in this national menopause education program, and we had a wonderful workshop there, and I met a woman there who I am very grateful to, and if she's listening to the podcast, she'll know who she is. And she said to me, I loved your live event. I thought I wouldn't be able to listen to all of it. I'd just pop in and out. But it was all so good. I stayed for the day and listened to all of it. It was amazing. And she subsequently went and told somebody that they really ought to talk to us, which was very, very wonderful. And that ended up last week, me and 3 of my fellow founders, Pat Duckworth, Joyce Harper and Kate Codrington, we went to the UK Houses of Parliament, no less, to talk to menopause champion Carolyn Harris MP, who has done so much to raise awareness. And we went and we talked to her because, we have been concerned about the overarching narratives, wherever they're coming from. So we were absolutely delighted to be able to go and talk to the chair of the all-party parliamentary group on menopause. And we talked about, getting more balance into the conversation. We talked about the importance of nutrition and lifestyle and exercise. Carolyn's very, very passionate about helping women in prisons who are going through menopause. Women who have life sentences and are obviously at some stage in that life sentence going to go through menopause, and they have no resources. And of course, we all know that stress and trauma have big parts to play in our menopause transition. Well, we don't all know it, but if you're on my side of the fence, you know it. And obviously, any woman in prison is going to be pretty stressed and probably has experienced some quite significant trauma in their life. So, important work to do encompassing all women, and it was brilliant. We had a fantastic conversation, and we're very hopeful that next year we'll be able to take that forward and do some, joint initiatives and help Carolyn spread the very important word about menopause. And we talked also about, HRT being one tool in the toolbox, but that there is so much else to consider. And yes, it can work very well for many women, but it's not a magic pill, and it's not going to solve all our problems. As I said in the last podcast, menopause, I think, is it's an invitation to do the work. It's like, I do think the way we go through menopause, it's like a health check on our overall health, getting a report card rather. As you know, I had an early menopause diagnosis at 41, and I don't think I was doing very well at looking after my health, and I think that's why that happened to me. So anyway, very exciting stuff. And what have I been doing on the podcast so far this season? We started off with Amanda O'Brien, who became a full-time digital publisher in Midlife. Now, what does that mean? It basically means that she makes money from blogging. And she has, I think, 4 sites, and she makes a lot of money from these sites because she creates content that people want, and then she has advertising on her site so that when people go to those sites, just seeing the ads means that she makes some money from them, and she's providing, great content. She's the boutique adventurer, so she travels all over the world. So she has fun creating the content. Then she has some websites on pets as well, on dogs and cats. So she's having a blast. So that was a lot of fun to talk to her. She's also an Australian who's made her life in London. So that was a lot of fun. So that was the first episode of the season. And then it was really lovely to finally be able to reconnect with Josephine Pembroke. The very first podcast that I went on as a guest was Josephine's podcast. And it was way back when I started the Mutton Club online magazine, which still exists. I should have said the Mutton Club online magazine is where I also make money from advertising like Amanda does, because I'm creating this content. People like the content, they come to the website. And then, so that actually makes me a little bit of money, not an enormous amount of money, but it keeps me ticking along with various things. It pays for certain things, which is always nice to do. Getting back to Josephine. So the very first podcast I was on was Josephine's, and that was Radio Gorgeous back in the day. And she loved the name The Mutton Club. She was one of the people who really loved the name. A lot of people don't like it because they don't like anything to do with mutton. And Josephine thought this was a real giggle. And Josephine is such an incredible character. She has basically got back on the stage in her 60s. She is doing a cabaret show all about ladies of the night in Soho. It's called The Working Girls of Soho. And if you get a chance to go and see it, it's great fun. She used to be in an all-girl band called Pussies Galore back in the day. She is a hoot, and she starts off the interview telling us about how she was talking about what she wanted to do with her life with Giles Brandreth over dinner, as you do. So, and then he came up with the idea that, well, she had to go and do this, not just talk about it, but actually, explore things. And that has ended up with her getting back on the stage, and she's all about taking baby steps so that we can make those big changes in life. Then, oh my goodness, the next episode, something incredibly dear to my heart. And I was so pleased and actually privileged to have the next guest on. Emily Kenway, much younger than my usual guests. I don't even know how old she is, but I'm guessing she's in her mid-30s. And she has written a book called Who Cares? The Hidden Crisis of Caregiving and How We Solve It. And it was written after the very painful experience of caring for her cancer-stricken mother. And it is such a powerful book. And if you're a regular listener, you'll know I'm doing this master's in gerontology, the study of aging. And caring comes up a lot, as you might imagine. And Emily's whole premise is that we are all going to encounter care, whether it's giving care or receiving care or both at some time in our lives. And as a society, we do not prioritise care in any shape or form. It exists on the sidelines. It exists in the shadows. We don't prioritise it because we don't prioritise older people. We're an ageist society. We don't hold older people in esteem. We don't think that frailty is okay. When we get frail, we want to hide from it. There's an element of shame associated with it. I see that in my mum, that she is embarrassed by things she can no longer do. And I'm always thinking, what's that about? Really, it's wrong. It's wrong. So, and we talk about, with Emily, how caring often falls to women. And she tells this fascinating story, which you may have heard me talk about this on the podcast already. But she tells this story about how when she was able to get away and she did the coast to coast walk, and she encountered several middle-aged men doing the walk. And they got chatting and they were talking, and they said that the men said that, their wives couldn't come along because they were looking after elderly parents. And Emily wanted to just check this and confirm, so it was, they're looking after their parents. And no, they're looking after mine. So the man had gone for the walk and the woman was at home looking after his elderly parent or parents. Something wrong with that. So there's lots and lots of things we talk about. Emily talks about the care commons idea, where if we look to the example of COVID, even where communities came together and were looking out for each other, why can't we have that kind of care within the community and go back to that? We have become so isolated in our communities now, and we need work from the government, we need action from the government, but we also can do things at a community level as well. It's a brilliant podcast. She has revolutionary ideas about care, and I will just be watching her progress with great interest because she's absolutely incredible. You can tell I'm a fan, can't you? Then I had a wonderful podcast guest in Dr. Sola Togan Butler, who is a psychotherapist out of the States. And we were talking about how to prevent midlife burnout, another of my favourite topics. Because we get to midlife and, guess what? We have a bad menopause experience because we are hovering very close to burnout much of the time because of all the cultural things that make women prioritise everybody else except themselves, like looking after their spouse's parent rather than going on a walking holiday. And Dr. Sola has Nigerian cultural background and US background, and we had a really interesting conversation about ageism and menopause in different cultures and the impacts of those. And I'm always fascinated by that in different cultures and how older women are perceived in different cultures. So that was a fascinating conversation and lots of tips and tricks to help us avoid burnout in midlife especially. Then I had lovely guest Sherry Sidoti, who lives on Martha's Vineyard in the US. I've never been, but it sounds so romantic. I just want to go to Martha's Vineyard. She's a yogi on Martha's Vineyard. Sounds so cool. But she's written a brilliant book about her own healing journey. So this is a podcast about healing through memoir, and her book is called A Smoke and a Song. And she really digs into the deep, dark things of her past. But by doing that, she is able to heal herself. And I often talk, and I talk in my book as well, about this need to do the work in midlife, this need to embrace our shadows, to look at the dark things as well as the good things, to evaluate what we want to take forward and what we want to leave behind. So this was a really powerful conversation. I loved Sherry's book. I thought it was so powerful. It was so beautifully written. Oh my goodness. So I really recommend that. And we were talking about, generational trauma and how she was able to access memories by using meditation and sensory awareness that she'd learned through her yoga practice. So really, really cool conversation. And then the most recent one was Staying Fit as We Age with Elaine Reynolds. She is originally from Australia, but now lives in Bali in Indonesia. She had an epiphany at 50 and bought a one-way ticket to Bali. Well, her passion is helping older women stay fit and strong and helping us grapple with when our bodies don't function very well. And it was like a sort of personal physio session for me a little bit because you may have heard me talk if you get my newsletter. And if you don't get my newsletter, do go to magnificentmidlife.com and sign up for my newsletter if you like this podcast. But I keep moaning about my knee. I've got a problem with my knee. I've actually got a slight tear in my meniscus. I have had a scan. But they've given me a scan. They've told me what was wrong, but they haven't given me a treatment plan, which is a bit annoying. And usually I love the NHS and I think we are incredibly lucky to have the NHS here in the UK, having lived in America and seen the state of the US medical system. I am a big fan of the NHS, but this time I don't seem to be getting the level of care that I think I should be. And I think it's perhaps because of my age and perhaps because this is a joint rather than an actual illness. Perhaps I'm jumping the gun here, but I don't know. I have a sense that perhaps that is something to do with it. Anyway, with Elaine, we were talking about, the importance of maintaining strength in all our muscles, and especially our glutes, to prevent injury. And that, as we get older, it can take longer to get better from injuries. And I think my knee injury has been brought on by bad running form. I think that is what has caused it. I'm hoping it's not just general degradation. I don't think it is. And so I'm working on it, but it's been niggling since June, and then it got quite bad in September, and it's still bad now, which is very annoying. And I don't like it, as you might imagine. I don't like it when my body doesn't work. But this is teaching me patience. And this is what I'm thinking. I have to think now, okay, what is this knee injury teaching me? And it's teaching me to slow down, to take it a little easier, to appreciate what my body can do, to appreciate how lucky I am, actually. And this is another thing that I discovered, when my mum first broke her hip and was in a wheelchair, I was looking, how could I wheel her around? Accessibility is terrible, really terrible. So we need to do lots of work on accessibility. So one of the things I'm going to be doing, with my masters in due course, I hope, is I want to change how society and the world revolves for older people, as I've been trying to do for menopause, which is really quite exciting. Really. I'm quite excited by it. So I've just done my assignment, which was on how can we encourage the use of telehealth amongst the older population. And this is another thing where I, see huge issues. During COVID, I'm sure I've said this on the podcast too, and I apologise if you heard me say it before, but my mum doesn't have a smartphone. So during COVID, they would send her text messages to get her to book in for her jabs for COVID, but she doesn't have a smartphone, so she can't do anything with the link they've sent her on a text message. Fortunately, at that stage, she could forward the text message to me, and I could then access the link on my smartphone. But what about people who don't have people to help them? What about people who are isolated in community? What about people who don't have children or don't have children living nearby or in the same country? This is going to be an issue moving forward, because even, we think in terms of, digital natives and non-digital natives, and that it's an issue now because a lot of us, we're not digital natives. But the speed with which technology changes means this is going to be an issue for a long time to come. It's going to continue to be an issue because the digital natives will get accustomed to one lot of technology and be able to use that and be able to manage their health online, for example. But then what if they change the applications? What if they change the devices that are being used, etc., etc.? One thing that I find fascinating is that touchscreen technology is difficult for older people to use, and I'm finding this myself already, which is slightly worrying. And why is it difficult to use? Because our skin on our fingers gets thicker and drier as we get older. And of course, these devices were designed for young people. They were designed and tested by younger people. So we need to get them tested by all age groups. Any development of any technology needs to include all age groups. So I'm probably going to be doing my dissertation on digital exclusion. You heard it here first, because this is something that fascinates me and that I can get quite hot under the collar about. And you know me, I get hot under the collar about issues and I want to change the world and do this, that and the other. But that's the beauty, I think, of being an older woman. I think we come into our power and our feistiness. And I'm always saying the flip side of anger is passion. And if we can go out there and change the world, then good for the world, say I. As I'm always saying, the men have done too much damage, haven't they? And they need us women to come and sort it out. So watch this space. I'm going to be covering probably all sorts of new things as we go forward. But we have some more episodes in this season. It's brilliant. It's really, really brilliant. And I love the podcast as always. And I hope you are enjoying it too. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, follow and share it. Also, giving a 5-star review really helps get the word out. You'll find the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can get my book, Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause and Beyond. Make the very best of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.